June 11, 1962. 9:37 p.m. Cell B-138, Alcatraz Island, San Francisco Bay. Frank Morris pressed his ear against the cold steel of the ventilation grate and listened. The guard's footsteps faded down the corridor, leather soles on concrete, steady, unhurried. Morris counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The rhythm was the same as every night for the past 6 months. He had timed it 412 times. The guard reached the end of B block in exactly 47 seconds. He paused at the junction, turned left toward the mess hall, and disappeared for precisely 14 minutes before looping back. 14 minutes. That was the window. That was everything. Morris pulled the fake ventilation grate from the wall. It was made from cardboard and painted to match the surrounding metal, a trick so simple it was almost insulting. Behind it gaped a hole roughly the size of a man's shoulders. 6 months of work with sharpened spoons and a drill fashioned from a stolen vacuum cleaner motor had carved that hole through moisture-damaged concrete, one handful of powder at a time. Morris placed the dummy head on his pillow. Soap, paper pulp, flesh-toned paint stolen from the prison art supplies, and real human hair swept from the barbershop floor. In the dim light of the cell block, with the blanket pulled up to its chin, the thing looked eerily alive. He stared at it for half a second. Then he squeezed through the hole and dropped into the utility corridor behind the cells. The corridor was 3 feet wide. No light. The air smelled of rust and salt and decades of damp concrete. Morris could feel the walls pressing against both shoulders as he moved. 2 cells down, John Anglin was already waiting. He was 32 years old, the 7th of 13 children born to sharecroppers in Donaldsonville, Georgia. He and his brother Clarence had robbed a bank in Columbia, Alabama, with a toy pistol, a detail that would have been funny if it hadn't earned them both a trip to the most feared prison in America. John's face was barely visible in the dark, but Morris could hear him breathing. Fast. Shallow. Scared. "Clarence?" Morris whispered. "Coming." A scraping sound. Then Clarence dropped into the corridor. He was a year younger than John, broader in the shoulders, and he'd nearly gotten stuck in his vent hole 3 nights ago during the last dry run. Tonight he'd greased his arms and torso with soap. It worked. He landed beside his brother without a sound. 3 men stood in a pitch-black corridor behind the cells of America's most escape-proof prison. Above them, 30 feet of exposed plumbing pipes led straight up to the top of the cell block. Beyond the cell block ceiling, a ventilation shaft opened onto the roof. Beyond the roof, the sky, the shore, the water, and either freedom or death. The plan required 7 stages. They had rehearsed each one in whispered conversations during meals, in tapped codes on water pipes at night, in hand signals across the prison yard. Morris had drawn the entire route from memory on a piece of cardboard he kept behind his dummy head. Every distance, every turn, every obstacle. But the plan had a hole. Alan West, the 4th man, the one who claimed he'd conceived the whole thing, was still in his cell. His ventilation grate was cemented in place. He'd reinforced it weeks earlier to prevent it from shifting during an inspection, and now the cement had hardened into a seal he couldn't break. Morris had gone to John's cell to ask for help pulling West through. They'd tried. The cement wouldn't give. And the clock was running. "We can't wait," Morris said. John looked back toward West's cell. In the dark, they could hear scraping, West clawing at concrete with bleeding fingers. "He'll be right behind us." "He won't. And if we stay, none of us are going anywhere." That was the first decision. Leave a man behind or lose everything. Morris didn't hesitate. He turned and started climbing. The plumbing pipes were slick with condensation. Each pipe was roughly 4 inches in diameter, enough to grip but not enough to rest on. Morris went first, pulling himself upward hand over hand, his prison-issue shoes slipping on the wet metal. 30 feet straight up in total darkness. The only sound was breathing and the faint groan of old pipes shifting under the weight of 3 grown men. At the top, Morris reached the ceiling of the cell block, a steel grate covering the entrance to the ventilation shaft. He pulled himself through and waited for the Anglins. John came next. Then Clarence. All three lay flat on the narrow platform at the top of the cell block, gasping. Below them, the entire prison slept. 336 inmates in their cells. Guards at their stations. The lighthouse beams swept across the island every 12 seconds, painting stripes of white light through the high windows. They had been climbing for 6 minutes. 8 minutes left before the guard returned to be block. The ventilation shaft was supposed to be their highway to the roof. It was. But what Morris hadn't fully accounted for was the fan housing. The motor had been removed years earlier by a former inmate electrician, a fact Morris had learned from a whispered conversation in the brush shop. The housing itself remained, a steel frame bolted to the shaft with rivets that had rusted but held firm. Morris pulled out the wrench he'd made from a kitchen spoon, flattened and bent over weeks of careful work. He fitted against the first bolt. It wouldn't turn. He pressed harder. Metal scraped against metal, a sound that in the dead silence of the cell block might as well have been a gunshot. All three men froze. Below and behind them, somewhere in the depths of the prison, a guard heard the noise. They knew this because a flashlight beam swept across the upper windows of the cell block, slow and searching. 11 seconds of light. Then darkness. The guard moved on. Morris worked the bolt again. This time it gave. Then the second. Then the third. He removed the fan housing and pushed himself through the shaft and onto the roof of the cell block. For the first time in over 2 years, Frank Morris felt wind on his face. Pacific air, cold, salt-heavy, carrying the sound of waves hitting rock somewhere far below. He crouched on the roof and looked out. San Francisco glittered to the south, a million lights reflected on black water. The Golden Gate Bridge hung in the fog to the west, its towers vanishing into mist. For 3 seconds he didn't move. He just looked. A man who had spent most of his 35 years inside concrete walls, looking at a horizon for the first time. Then John's hand appeared through the shaft, and Morris pulled him up, and the moment was over. The descent was 50 feet down an exterior drain pipe on the north side of the building. The pipe ran along the kitchen wall, a blind spot between 2 guard towers, mapped months in advance. Morris went first, gripping the pipe with his hands and knees, sliding more than climbing. His palms burned against the cold metal. At the bottom, gravel. Then 2 12-foot chain-link fences topped with barbed wire. Clarence went over first. He was the most athletic of the 3, a natural climber. His forearms caught on the wire. He didn't make a sound. He dropped to the other side, blood running down both wrists, and kept moving. Beyond the fences, a steep embankment led to the northeast shore. They had chosen this spot because it sat in the shadow between 2 searchlight arcs, a 7-second gap every rotation. 7 seconds to cross 40 feet of open ground. Morris counted the light, tapped John's shoulder, and all 3 ran. The raft was hidden in the rocks near the water's edge, exactly where they'd stashed it 2 days earlier. It was built from more than 50 stolen raincoats, collected over months from other inmates, some donated, some bartered for cigarettes, some simply taken. The seams were glued with rubber cement stolen from the prison workshop and heat-sealed using steam pipes in the utility corridor. It wasn't elegant. It looked like something a child might build. But it was airtight. Beside it lay 3 life vests made from the same material and a bellows fashioned from a concertina. The same type of small accordion Morris had ordered to cover the sound of drilling. They inflated the raft with the bellows. The rubber swelled and tightened. Morris tested the seams with his hand. They held. He looked at the water. San Francisco Bay stretched before them, 1.5 miles to Angel Island, their first target. From Angel Island, they would cross Raccoon straight to the Marin County mainland, steal clothes, steal a car, and vanish. That was the plan. Every step mapped, every variable calculated. Except the water. The water was 50 degrees. At 50 degrees, the human body begins losing core temperature almost immediately. Muscles cramp. Coordination deteriorates. At this temperature, a man in the water without protection has maybe 20 minutes of useful function. After that, the cold takes over. The mind slows. The hands stop working. The current in the bay runs at 6 to 8 knots, strong enough to pull a swimmer sideways faster than he can paddle forward. Strong enough to drag a raincoat raft out past the Golden Gate and into the open Pacific, where no one would ever find it. Morris, John, and Clarence pushed the raft into the water and climbed on. The current caught them immediately. They paddled with wooden boards they'd shaped in the prison workshop, but the raft spun and drifted. The lights of Angel Island were to the north. The current was pulling them west. And then they were gone. Into the fog, into the bay, into the dark water between Alcatraz and the mainland. 3 men on a raft made of raincoats, paddling against a current that had killed men before. That's the last confirmed moment. Everything after is silence, speculation, and 63 years of unanswered questions. At 7:15 the next morning, Correctional Officer Bill Long made his rounds in B Block. He saw the shape in Morris's bed. He saw the hair on the pillow. He almost moved on. Then something, instinct maybe, or the angle of the head, made him reach out and touch the face. Cold. Hard. Soap. The siren went off 11 seconds later. Every guard on the island mobilized. The Coast Guard launched boats. Helicopters swept the bay. Army units searched Angel Island and the Marin shoreline. They found pieces of the raft washed up on Angel Island. They found a paddle. They found a sealed plastic bag containing photographs and a list of addresses, the Anglin family contacts. But they did not find Frank Morris. They did not find John Anglin. They did not find Clarence Anglin. 3 men vanished from the most secure prison ever built, and the United States government, with every resource at its disposal, could not determine whether they were alive or dead. Frank Morris planned every stage of that escape for 6 months. He timed the guards, mapped the blind spots, built the tools, sculpted the heads, assembled the raft, chose the tide, picked the night. If that level of human will doesn't earn your attention, nothing will. Subscribe, because Alcatraz was just the beginning, and the ocean keeps secrets better than any prison. The FBI investigated for 17 years. They tracked hundreds of leads, interviewed dozens of witnesses, analyzed every scrap of physical evidence recovered from the bay. In 1979, they closed the case. Official conclusion: the 3 men likely drowned. The water was too cold. The current was too strong. The raft was too flimsy. No bodies were ever recovered, but that wasn't unusual. The bay's currents regularly carried objects out to the Pacific. Case closed. Except it wasn't. In the years that followed, the Anglin family reported strange things. Their mother received flowers every year, no card, no return address. At a family funeral in 1989, 2 tall men appeared, stood at the back, wept over the casket, and left before anyone could speak to them. Nobody recognized them. Or rather, 2 family members thought they did but couldn't be sure. The men were the right age. The right build. In 2015, a photograph surfaced. Allegedly taken in Brazil in 1975, it showed 2 men standing in front of a farmhouse. Facial recognition software analyzed by 5 independent firms returned a match for John Anglin. The results for Clarence were close but inconclusive. His face was turned at an angle. The photograph source was a man named Fred Britzi, a childhood friend of the Anglins from Florida. Britzi claimed he'd visited them in South America. The U.S. Marshals investigated. They could not confirm or deny the photograph's legitimacy. Then the letter arrived. Postmarked 2013. Delivered to the Richmond station of the San Francisco Police Department. Handwritten. 9 sentences that reignited a 60-year mystery. The writer claimed to be John Anglin. He said all 3 men survived the crossing. He said Morris died in 2005. Clarence in 2008. He said he was the last one alive, 83 years old, dying of cancer. He offered to turn himself in exchange for medical treatment. The FBI held the letter for 5 years before acknowledging its existence. Their laboratory tested it for fingerprints and DNA. The results came back inconclusive. The handwriting analysis, inconclusive. The U.S. Marshals called it a hoax. The Anglin family called it proof. The case remains open. The warrants remain active. 3 names on a list waiting. Cell B-138 is still there. You can visit it. Tourists file past it every day, over 1 million a year. The hole in the wall behind the ventilation grate has been preserved exactly as Morris left it. The fake grate is back in place. But if you lean close, you can see the scratches in the concrete where a sharpened spoon carved through solid rock, night after night for 6 months. 63 years of sea air haven't smoothed them. The scratches are still sharp. As if someone might come back to finish what they started. Nobody has. Nobody has had to. This story is based on real events. Some details, dialogue, and scenes have been dramatized for narrative purposes.